All right. Going live. We are live. Team early. I'm not going to swear because you have kids in the background. Team early and fun. But if you curse throughout the podcast, that's fine. But we've got Noah here from the Wisconsin Backcountry Hunters and Anglers Board of Directors. I'm trying to think. Noah, I think the first time was through your podcast. I think that's where I heard your name or saw you mentioned. And then I think I was in. Do you know Drew Youngdyke? Did you
I
have
know
him
who
on?
he is. But
Okay.
I never mind.
Okay. So maybe it was through TJ then. I couldn't remember if it was through TJ or Drew. I was introduced to the podcast you were hosting at the time, and then got to know you through the Wisconsin BHA streams and then social medias. But let's start with who you are. You can go over what you do with BHA, what you do outside of that, and then let's go over how quarantine has changed your life, just to make it applicable for everyone.
All right. Well, like you said, I'm Noah Wishau. I'm on the state board for BHA. I'm the policy chair. I guess in my outside life, I'm an attorney live down in the Racine area. I live actually in Waterford, but my office is in Racine. Got 2 kids and a wife. How quarantine has changed my life, just like basically everybody else, I'm at home. So right now I'm not in my office like I normally would be on a Monday morning like this. I'm at home. Got my son in the other room watching. I think he's watching Stinky and Dirty right now. My daughter is actually still sleeping, which is amazing.
Fair
So
enough.
yeah,
Fair enough.
that's
I like it. I've got a couple different notes I've written down here just from social media musings, posting that I've picked up over the last couple of weeks. But so as part of this series on my podcast, I love to talk with the BHA members and the board about kind of their early life. So what did outdoor recreation look like for you as a child, teenage years, college, and then to current day? What does that evolution look like for you?
as a child, it was basically just following my dad around, doing pretty much everything: squirrel hunting, goose hunting, deer hunting, a lot of fishing, especially when I was real young, ice fishing, and then open water fishing. My mom tells the story that my dad actually left the hospital when I was born to go buy a boat. He says it's like a day or two later, but um, so yeah, we did a lot of fishing. Um, I was little. I was probably 3 years old, and I was up in a tree stand with them, bow hunting, and not much older than that when I was. In fact, I think about it. My daughter's 7 now, and I was getting left in a tree stand and just, okay, stay there. I'll see you at dark, and then they'd walk away. Him or my uncle would walk away, and I'd just sit in the tree stand until they came back. And now I think they'd probably get arrested for that. But it's just that's the way it was. I started playing baseball about that age, and that pretty much took over my life for the next. Oh, I played all the way through college, so open water fishing kind of took a back seat. We'd fish a little bit, but with baseball was between me and my sisters who both played softball. It was almost a 7 day a week thing. So then it became just a lot of hunting all the way through school. And then, I played sports, but there was always, other than baseball, everything else kind of took a backseat to hunting. In fact, um, I was probably I was an okay basketball player like through middle school, but I had no interest in going out in high school because my dad actually went out for basketball in high school, made the team. They handed out the sneakers. They had their meeting or whatever, and the coach said, "If any of you guys think you're going deer hunting, you're not. Basketball takes priority over that." My dad got up in the middle of the meeting and handed the sneakers in and walked out, and that was enough to scare away 2 generations of Wishaws from having anything to do with basketball. So
That's awesome.
uh, so yeah, so I mean that's pretty much what we did. Went to college, hunted around campus a little bit. I went to Ripon College. I was up there a few years ago and realized I should have done a whole lot more while I was there, but it was college. And now, yeah, I just do as much as I can, get the kids out, trying to do what they can without, I guess, making it too hard on them. But so.
I like it. So that explains why you're slowly descending into madness without baseball right now. I see you mention
I am.
the lack of baseball.
Yeah, I am. It's just a weird time. It's a weird time to be alive, I guess, for on so many different levels. But and that's not the most important one. But it would help if it was around.
Yeah,
so
for sure. Going back to, so you're someone that's you've grown up in a hunting and a fishing family. Outdoor recreation's been a big part of your life. How does that impact how you're interacting with your children and sharing the outdoors with them?
I mean, I try to get them out to do stuff. Mm-hmm. It's hard because I shouldn't say it's hard. It changes the way that you hunt and fish. Mm-hmm. Especially, you start to think about easy spots for them to get to, as opposed to, I'm gonna load up and walk 3/4 of a mile or a mile back to wherever. It's okay. What's nice and easy for them to get to if we're gonna do, what, and what's an easy sit for them. And trying to make it where it's not too much of a punishment, because that you gotta learn to love something before you're willing to suffer for it. And I'm trying to get them just to like it before it's okay. Now it's, the middle of November, we're gonna go sit all day. So
I really love that quote. You have to learn to love something, or you have to love something before you can suffer for it. I love that.
Right.
That just described all of my first season of bird hunting. Like, I'm all in, right? Like, put all the training with the dog. I love walking. I love just picking a direction and going. And I learned very quickly. A few people poked along with, just wanted to know what it was like. And I'm inviting them, and realized very quickly, like, a good way to burn someone off from that is to go on just a death hike through a bunch of different aspen stands.
Right.
And then they're miserable on the other side. So I can totally appreciate that.
It makes it hard. And then there's also kind of just like a ethos that you get when you're a hunter, where I talk about it a lot. Like, my wife, I'll be out ice fishing all day or something like that, and it's cold or whatever, and I'll come back and I'm like, it was cold today. And she goes, why didn't you come in? And no, because nobody else wanted to come in. Like, I won't be the last one to agree with you. Like, if someone says, let's go in, I'll be like, okay, let's go.
Yeah.
But I'm not going to be the one to bring it up.
Yeah.
And I don't know why. And it might be a macho thing, but I don't really know that it's even a macho thing. It's just, I don't want to be the first one to come in. So you just sit there and stare at each other, and you're ice fishing and the flags aren't going up, and it's 0 degrees with a 10, 20 mile an hour wind, and you're just sitting there.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
Definitely. No, I can relate to that. So you're a collegiate athlete, you're a lawyer now, outdoor recreation. How does that all fit in? Like, I've heard horror stories about law school. So what does that all look like for you? Like, where does the collegiate athletics, the fitness involved with that, school, and then the outdoor space, what does that look like for you then and now?
I guess I don't really understand. I mean, basically, law school, I kind of stopped the athletics, and just and really did. I mean, it just because of the way school was. I was busy with that. So I guess that's the hunting and fishing have always been there. It's always been something that I'm gonna do. So
okay.
I guess I don't. It's a place to get away, I guess. And it doesn't have to be. It doesn't have to be an elk trip to Idaho. It can be just give me a couple hours, or give me 45 minutes at the end of the day if I can get out and sit for the last 45 minutes, to see if I can catch something sneaking through. That's enough. So,
yeah, no, that's perfect.
Yeah.
That's exactly where I kind of was wondering if you would go. Is like what? It's a crazy time in your life, right? You're the collegiate athletics that so many college athletes, they like that's your identity, that's the person you are, what you've busted your butt for your entire life, and now there's this next step of, the journey through life, law school, becoming a lawyer. And I was just curious where hunting and fishing in the outdoor space, where it plugged into those positions in those periods of your life.
Yeah, I think it's always been I don't know if therapeutic's the right word, but it's always been that, like, even when I was so busy and that I didn't have enough time to hunt and fish like I wanted to, it was always a place to go, even if it was just, you know, chasing, fishing bluegills in college off a railroad bridge in Ripon. I'd do that. And then, and it was for an hour or so just to calm everything down. And then now it's taken more and more of a front seat because baseball's kind of gone to the wayside. My kids are just getting to the age now where they're going to start playing. So we'll see what that ends up looking like. But so now that's my recreational pursuit is hunting and fishing, doing that type of stuff. So
I like it. I guess for the not adult life, right? Hunting, like you've mentioned, the mental escape, kind of where you can go to reflect or just unwind, bring everything back down again. You and I have mentioned, talked a little bit about dog training. You're obviously a big deer hunter. Where does skill acquisition in kind of hunting or the outdoor life fit in for you? So like what are some things you're focusing on that you are passionate about in the outdoor space?
You mean like trying to get better? I guess.
Yep. Yeah.
Well, right now, I don't know. Like this time of year, it's a lot of just kind of wandering around, looking, kind of scouting new spots, I guess.
Yep.
Trying to find different spots. Especially, we have land up in Wapaka County that is always there, and that's where I do the majority of my hunting, or deer hunting anyway. But now with having, with little kids and stuff, it's, if I can find places around or closer to home where I can just go for an afternoon, it's a lot easier to do that. So you're not away from the family as much. And I'd say to keep my wife happy, but honestly, I like my kids. So, I don't like being away from them a whole lot. Don't tell them I said that. I hope they don't listen to this. So then just, trying to find places around here to go and spend a few hours or do whatever you're doing. I shoot my bow a lot, just kind of always have. I'm shooting a old bear grizzly that
nice.
I picked up, and so I'm getting into that. I finally got some arrows that are flying right out of it. Miles Thompson would probably cringe if he heard about how I came to my arrow building thing, or got my arrow set up, which was I just kept buying different ones until that flies okay. So,
there you go. I'll figure it out. And for everyone listening, the bear grizzly, that's a recurve, correct?
That's a recurve, yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, it's. I think the one that I have is. I think I dated it. It's like 1973. It was built.
Nice.
So,
I've got one as well, but I have no idea the age.
Yeah, I look at the coin and then the serial numbers, and it's not perfect. It's because they use coins only for a certain year. The little medallions that are on the side of the bowl, but then they'd have half a box left going into the next year, so they just use them up, and so it's not perfect, I guess. But
yeah,
and I'm sure there may be a bear expert out there listening to this going, "That's not right." So I don't.
No worries.
Just what I read online.
Yep.
And it doesn't really matter to me. It's more how the bow shoots. So.
Exactly. So yeah, for those, the reason I ask about all those questions is just from, like I said, going back, college athletics again, what you do now, kind of what your mindset looks like going into the outdoor space. Because as a college athlete, I figure you got to be someone that likes to get better at things. Like you mentioned, you got to love it, and then you can learn to suffer for it. So that's why I was asking those questions.
Yeah.
Do you have dogs? I know you and I have messaged back and forth about dog training.
I have a yellow lab. He's 8. I think he's sleeping on the couch right now. But yeah, I have an 8-year-old yellow lab.
And boy, do you get out? Do you get out with him very often?
Yes, I trained him a lot when he was a pup. Probably kind of like you said, let's get better at something, and probably 3-4 nights a week I was gone with him for a couple hours, working on especially duck hunting type stuff. So he's good. He has his hunter retriever title. Eventually, once I got to that point, I kind of was like, how much dog do I need? Like, I don't need a, it was just, and then by that point, my son and daughter were getting bigger, or my daughter was getting bigger. So I didn't want to be home as much or be away as much. But my wife's the first year I really trained him, I went to Canada with him when he was a pup. But then the second year is the same thing. I was working with him all summer, and then we got to the fall, and okay, I'm going bow hunting. And my wife's like, "Well, you take the dog?" I'm like, "You take the dog bow hunting?" She goes, "What? Why'd you spend all that time with him?" I'm like, "Because it was something to do." So I mean, I get out duck hunting a little bit, but not a whole lot. I tried to more and more with him when he was. I duck hunt more now that I have him than I used to, just because I make a point of going with him.
Yeah.
And we chase pheasants around and stuff. Now he's old, and his feet are kind of. I had to toughen up his feet because they get torn up pretty quick when we're hunting. So, and that's just because we don't do a whole lot during the summer and whatnot now. So that's a goal this year. Just let's get them into shape so that way we can do some stuff this year. But,
nice. I like it.
So, yeah, Bill. 1 second, my daughter just got up. So
yeah, get on the breakfast train.
Okay. You want some breakfast? Daddy's talking about it.
Rock and roll. We've got dad duties. I have to sing a song in the background. Got Django sleeping on my hammock on the floor. Hey, buddy. Morning nap time for the dogs around here, that's for sure. Get out, do some training. Oh, for everyone.
Sorry about that.
Not a problem. I was just talking about my dog, and we've got TJ in the background, so everybody was entertained.
Perfect.
All right, so I think we've painted a pretty good picture. Outdoor space, what you've got going on. Let's get into Backcountry Hunters and Anglers. How long have you been a member? How did you find the organization, and why did you want to, with all the other stuff you've got going on, why did you take up the mantle of board of directors?
Well, I guess I'd been a member for probably 4 or 5 years, maybe. I found out about it. I think probably Steve Ranella, if I had to guess. I think that's probably the first time I heard about him. And I kind of checked him out for a while before I joined. But yeah, why did I want to be on the? I guess that's a weird question. Like you said, or basically about 3 years ago, I started my own podcast, and it really came about because I was sick of the social media posts and the way that the hunting industry seemed to be going, and it didn't seem like people were talking about the stuff that actually mattered, I guess, or actually like they weren't talking about the way that I knew most, or what I thought a lot of hunters saw. It was a lot of how to shoot a big buck, how to do this, how to do that, and not. I majored in political science in college and history, and started reading. I reread Sand County Almanac. I'd read it, I don't know, 15 years ago or so, but reread that, and then was reading books by Jim Poslowitz and those types of people. And then I started how we got to here, people didn't seem to understand that. So then when they were making decisions or complaining about stuff on how to go forward, they weren't looking at it. They didn't seem like they were looking at it through the lens of where we used to be, and, I'm talking like the major sacrifices that hunters and anglers have made and the major efforts that have gone into it over the last 120 years. People didn't seem to understand that. So it was just, and people, I think people had, or it seemed like people had it in their mind, and I probably did too before I looked into it, that last year was better than this year, and it's always been that way.
Yeah.
And man, I wish I could go back to my grandfather's day and imagine how many deer there would have been then. And then you find out there weren't.
Mm-hmm.
And my grandfather shot his first deer probably only about 10, 12 years before I was born, just because there weren't deer around.
Mm-hmm.
And he was, there was deer up north, but he was, he's a working guy. So going up north wasn't necessarily a option for him. He duck hunted a lot, so there was ducks down here, so that's what he did, ducks and pheasants.
Yep.
But the idea of going, of shooting a deer wasn't a possibility for a lot of people for a long time, and it's only been, I was born in '83, so probably only 10, 20 years, about 20 years before, 10, 20 years before I was around, that there were deer kind of in the southern half of the state. Is really when you look back through the history. So anyway, that was all going on. So I decided to start a podcast to talk about kind of those things, and then talk about. I was sick of barroom biology that was happening, and these rumors, just rumors and conspiracy theories and that. So I decided that I wanted to talk to smart people. So I talked to I had George Meyer on. I had Jim Posowitz on. I had Tom Hauge, which is not ended up being, but it's TJ's dad. I had Adrian Whitehaven, who was the big large carnivore specialist for the DNR for 20 some odd years, because I wanted to hear what they had to say, because I was sick of hearing what just random people had to say about different things.
Yeah.
So anyway, did that. Went to a pint night for BHA up in Elm Grove. That's where I met BJ and Jeff and Joe. And then I interviewed Jeff about BHA. And then it took a couple weeks to get it up or whatever it was. But I called him just to let him know that it was up. And he said, "Oh, by the way, we have a spot on the board. Are you interested?" And I said, "I guess, sure." And then like the next day he called back and said, "Okay, you're on the board." And then the day after that, or no, not even the day after that, like an hour and a half later, I got a phone call from Jason Meekoff asking if I wanted to go to Washington, D.C., which I'm like, Jeff just told me it was like a couple hours, maybe an hour a week, a couple hours a week. But so I ended up going to D.C. and then, so I've been on the board since May of 2018. And then the podcast kind of went away just because I don't have enough time to do everything. But
right.
So that's how I ended up on the board.
Fair enough. I like it. And so I've had a fair number of BHA board members on the podcast, and everyone kind of has like their niche, their thing they're focused on through the BHA chain, kind of the thing they're covering on. And I know you've mentioned you're on policy. What specific policies are you focused on? What's closest to home, or kind of the biggest thing you're championing right now?
Well, I kind of got we kind of have a large view. I guess I'm not focused on any one policy necessarily. I think there's a bunch. Right now, the big pushes for this year, or this year, and then whatever this year looks like after I guess we all can leave our houses again, are one being the railroad crossing bill. Back in 2006, the legislature changed the law that for 100 years had exempted. Basically, there's a law that you can't trespass on railroad property, meaning railroad tracks. For 100 years, there was an exemption in that statute that said, unless you're crossing directly across a railroad track. In 2006, they took that exemption out, and it was kind of, as far as I can tell, I went back and looked. I don't know that anybody even really noticed it at the time. And certainly it doesn't seem like any of the outdoor organizations noticed it, because none of them came out against it. And I didn't see anybody writing, it was kind of a minor change that nobody seemed to have noticed. But what it ended up doing is it basically made it illegal for hunters and anglers to cross the railroad tracks, to get from, basically there's 121 DNR-owned properties that are bisected by railroad tracks. And then for those people who are familiar with like the Mississippi River, the railroad tracks runs pretty much all the way right along the shore of the river from like Prairie du Chien all the way up to Buffalo County and farther. So thousands of acres of access are cut off because we can't cross the railroad tracks other than designated crossings. So we're working with Safari Club International trying to get that overturned. Some other groups, Wisconsin Wildlife Federation, I know is involved, the Cross Area Conservation Association or something like that. So that's a big one. Hopefully a bill was introduced at the end of this session. And the hope is, and it looked like it had some support. It didn't go through, but the hope is that in the next session, we're going to make a push for it, and hopefully it'll work out.
Gotcha. And people, real quick, like that's a big one for me. Like growing up rabbit hunting with my dad, we crossed a lot of railroad tracks. But
right.
Is that something to like for people to help out with that? Email, call, send letters to your representatives, and then I think there's a link for that on the BHA page for the
and we'll be sending more out, especially once the session starts again. We'll probably do more of that, and we'll keep people updated as to what's going on via our page and then emails and what they can do to help.
Awesome. All right, and then next one. What else you got?
Other issues. Well, CWD is obviously a big problem in Wisconsin. We've been it's been a major focus for our group for the last couple of years. We're working on that. We put out 3 dumpsters this year. And we're hoping to expand that program to collect carcasses, so that way they don't end up out on the landscape, in an attempt to keep CWD off the landscape and keep it from spreading. On the policy side, we last year spent a day in Madison going over all our policies, but we spent a lot of time on CWD, just trying to educate the legislators on it, because they just didn't seem to understand at all what was going on. So that's going to be a big thing. Trying to expand the dumpster program, doing some other issues. And we'll be working on that again this year. Other than that, then we have the Knowles Nelson Stewardship Fund.
I love the dad multitasking going on right now. Lots of respect.
We have the Knowles Nelson Stewardship Fund, which is a program. It's similar to the Land and Water Conservation Fund, but in Wisconsin. Basically, it's the main public access acquisition tool that we have. And if you basically go around to any of your favorite outdoor spots that has a sign saying what it is, there's probably a Knowles Nelson sticker on there. So
definitely,
all the way from, we have a couple of kayak slips here in Waterford on the Fox River. And those are all paid for with Knowles Nelson Stewardship Funds. I go to a wildlife area, and a lot of that was paid for by Knowles Nelson Stewardship Funds. So that's a big thing. The governor only got reauthorized last year for 2 years, which kind of puts the whole program at risk, obviously, because if it doesn't get reauthorized, it goes away. But only having it for 2 years really impacts the amount of, a lot of these projects take longer than 2 years. So you can't start a project not knowing if there's actually going to be funding for it. So that's a big one we're dealing with on that. Those are the major things that we're dealing with. We have every, I guess periodically the DNR has to go through and the county forests have to go through their plans for what they want to do with the county forests. The county boards have to deal with. So we are kind of keeping an eye on those, just making sure that nothing too much is changing on those, especially in the larger county forests around the state. Just dealing with how they're, looking at the plans and determining whether or not they're good for hunters and anglers or not. And if they're not, then we kind of let them know and give our input. So we're right in the middle of, actually today I got to send an email out to our policy team. We have a meeting tomorrow night, our policy committee, just to talk about all this stuff. And then obviously with, I guess, the COVID-19 thing going through, like I said, when we come out on the other side of this, I think everything is going to be changed. And I don't know what the focus of the legislature is going to be, let alone, if we're going to be fighting, if the economy takes as big a hit as it could on this, of how much we're going to be fighting just to keep the status quo versus trying to actually make gains, on these issues. So we're going to be, it's an ever evolving situation. So we're going to be dealing with all of that.
Definitely. Oh man, so much stuff. Thanks for so it's always good to, especially for myself, I always need the reminders and talking with people. This week's episode of the podcast actually drops with Ben Gruhl. I'm sure, right? He's on the policy team.
The policy committee, yeah.
Yeah, he's a badass dude. He knows a lot. But that episode drops this week, kind of talking about bigger picture things for people in the outdoor rec space. And that's another reason I do these episodes, is getting exposure for BHA to kind of like the outdoor fitness rec community. So a lot of people that listen to the podcast don't necessarily hunt, fish, or trap, but they're using these public access places, like you mentioned with Knowles Nelson being the Wisconsin specific public land acquisition fund. These kayak slips, these portages, these easements through these areas. That's a lot of these people are using those, and getting them aware of BHA and what they're doing at a state and nationwide level is I think something that's important, kind of connecting all of these micro communities together within BHA. So it's good to always get a reminder of the policy and kind of what people can be doing and focusing on individually throughout the year when they're reaching out to their representatives. That's something I'm trying to do a better job of as a constituent, is like being aware of these topics that are important to my way of life, and then what are some things I can be doing daily, weekly, or monthly to make sure that I'm doing my due diligence of fighting for them. So thank you for that, Noah. Another thing I want to talk about and kind of get you to weigh in on is the R3 movement. Are you familiar with like AJ DeRosa from Project Upland and Northwoods Collective?
I know who he is, yeah.
Okay, so he came to UWSP last year and gave a presentation about R3, and he was specifically talking about like the millennial foodie wave that's coming into hunting, and like how they're good and beneficial. And then I forget the name of it was kind of like what we were talking about before the podcast, but there's the I don't know if you want to call it the redneck or the old way, like they don't, like you said, they don't care about the history. They just want more. They're like more opportunity, bigger everything, bigger bag limits. That's all they really care about. But I read it was like soon after that push, but I can't remember which publication was kind of anti hipster / food movement, saying, well, maybe I want just my ground venison and Hamburger Helper or Sloppy Joe's, and I don't want the like Hank Shaw of cooking or like all these crazy recipes. So it was kind of like this pushback from some people in the hunting space against the hipster food community in R3, but which is crazy to me that people feel that way. But I want to get your viewpoint on R3. Is it something you're thinking about? Is it something you're aware of as a dad, as a member of BHA, or a board member of BHA?
Yeah, of course. I think when you look at it just from a trying to think of how to go about this question. I got like 8 different trains of thought on it. It's important, I guess, just putting back on the policy hat, and I'm just going to touch on this briefly because I think it's maybe the least important portion of this, but hunters make up in Wisconsin a little bit less, somewhere between maybe 5 and 10% of the population, maybe. And that's just looking at the license sales versus the amount that versus the total population. So when you look at it that way, I guess the issues that I just talked about, if it's just hunters and anglers that are fighting for them, we don't make up a big chunk of the population. So obviously, the more we have, the more people might listen, and the more that people legislators are hearing from everybody on this, the more important it is. So that's kind of a side issue, but obviously, I think I heard Steve Ranella talk about it one time where he's like, if I had my way, I'd be the only hunter and angler, because then all the spots will be open, so I wouldn't have to fight with anybody to get the best spots. But at the same point, I can't, but then I'm only one person who's voting to keep this way of life going. So you kind of play that balance. So I think that's one issue. But other than that, just to keep it going. I mean, people, I got 2 kids, and basically just to maintain the status quo of hunting and fishing, maintain that number between 5 and 10%, I just bat 500, and one of them has to be a hunter or fish or angler. And that's just to keep it where we are now. And that's every hunter has to have a kid, and that kid has to hunt. So if we're actually going to, I see people, I'm a dad, I want them to hunt and fish. So I don't want to kind of poo-poo that, but that's like the minimum that you can do to keep this lifestyle going, is to pass it on to your child or your, maybe 2 children. If both of them, we have to bat 100, we have to bat 1,000 in order to keep this thing going that way. So it's important that it's not just them that I turn on to this. You got to bring other people in order, either 1, to make it grow a little bit, or 2, just to keep it going. Because we're losing hunters every year. The older generation, as they're falling off, aren't being replaced at the rate that they have been previously. So, it's important. BHA, we do the learn to bow hunt. We do the learn to turkey hunt. Kind of everything got shot up this year, so nobody knows what's going on with that. But we do, Joe Steffen does a great job working on our R3 committee. And, I participated. My dad actually came out with me last year to participate in the learn to bow hunt. And we mentored the people, and it's just a great time watching these people. And you don't realize when you grew up doing it. I think there's a couple of things. You don't realize, 1, how lucky you were to have grown up doing it, and then 2, until you get into that situation, 2, how much you actually know, because there's stuff that I'll be the first to admit, I don't think I'm a good hunter. I'm good at going somewhere, putting up with a lot of discomfort, and sitting there for a long time and not wanting to. But other than that, that's basically my main attribute as a hunter when it comes to, to everything. But when you go with somebody who's never hunted before and they're asking questions, it's stuff that you don't even think about anymore. It's just, okay, the wind's blowing this way, so we got to sit here because the deer got to be down in there, and they're going to want to go over there. And all that just kind of goes through your head when you're setting up, or when you're doing stuff, without really giving it much thought other than just what I just did. Well, when you're sitting with somebody and then you explain to them, okay, let's do this, and they're like, well, why? And what do you do there? And if the deer comes out, when we're bow hunting, when should I draw? When shouldn't I draw? What should I do? And it's a neat experience, because you just realize how much this, maybe by just absorption, you picked up over the years. I guess talking about the foodie movement, I like cooking. So I do a lot of, I like Hank Shaw. I actually liked him, probably since, 2007, 2008, almost when he first started the blog. I stumbled across it and have followed him pretty religiously. But at the same point, there's nothing wrong with grinding up your burger. And I find myself going, when they shoot a deer and the whole thing gets turned into sausage, I find myself kind of feeling sad about that, just because, there's so much other stuff you can do than just eat the sausage. But it's getting used. And honestly, when you talk to non-hunters, I don't hunt, but I love venison sausage. And you know what? That's good. I feel sad for them, because it's like, that's what, 30% pork probably. And you don't actually taste the venison most of the time in that, but they have a good outlook on hunting because they like venison sausage that one of their neighbors gave them at some point. We have to take that and run. We have to be happy with that. I mean, it's just, there's a lot of, I talked about the hunters being the 5 to 10%, but it's not a homogenous group. And when there's a lot of friction between different types of hunters in that 5-10%, and it's pushing back and forth. And we need to realize, I think you talked about the older hunters having disdain for the hipsters and the tree hugger movement and that type of stuff. But I think that there's I don't want to use hipsters and tree huggers, because I don't think, those are kind of derogatory terms, but you have those younger hunters also having disdain for the old, I guess, the quote unquote rednecks. And I think we just need to realize what we all are and have a conversation that, what's one thing we all have in common? It's that, I like watching the sun come up in the morning, and there's nothing better than that. Or I like, for deer hunting, when there's a snap and I know a deer is coming, that's better than any drug. I've said before, if that's what drugs feel like, I understand why people do drugs. Like, it's just, I get it. And that's what we need to focus on, is those experiences where we realize we're all one when it comes to this, and we're all in the same boat. So, the guy who's saying that the DNR imported all the wolves and they brought in Canadian wolves because of whatever, you know what? He's still a hunter, and he's still better than somebody who wants hunting to be outlawed. Now, we can have a conversation about why what he's saying is stupid, but I think we need to realize we're all still on the same team. So we got to try to set some of these differences aside. And I'm just as guilty as anybody else. They drive me nuts sometimes. But we were having a conversation before coming on the air about me trying to give TJ a stroke by sending him some of these conspiracy theories. I like doing that because I know it makes him mad, and I like watching him blow up about stuff. But at the same point, that guy's more likely to vote for, that guy's going to, if it ever came to a vote on whether or not hunting and fishing should be outlawed, that guy's going to vote no. And we got to remember that. So I don't know if I went way off track there, and sometimes I do that. So I'm sorry.
That was perfect. Loved it. Thank you for, that's getting it. I think it's like you just talked about, finding the common ground between all of us, and if we can hear that from as many people as possible, I think we're going to grow an acceptance and an acknowledgement of why the hunting, trapping, fishing way of life, why this subsistence or indigenous way of life is so important. Like, we need these places, we need these skills, these traditions. We need to see them continued, and I think that's the main focus of what it is you're talking about. So, with my next question, and you and I have talked about this, we've messaged each other back and forth. I want to dive, and this was the big thing for me last year when TJ asked me to kind of lead the hike to hunt at the state rendezvous, and then as a voice in it through in the state is the acknowledgement that we do not all need to be Cameron Haynes, right? We don't need to be doing these 1,000 rep workouts. We don't need to run a marathon a day. We don't need to, I think the fitness health world has, and I'm sure you've seen it, has crept into outdoor recreation, hunting, fishing, and like strangled it in some regards. You know, the supplements, the micro trash that's created. Like
Right.
I see these my friends, you know, people I love in the outdoor space, and they're posting like supplements. I'm like, those are all plastic containers, single use plastic containers. Where do you think those end up? Or like the camping and all of the single use micro trash, like tear open your branched chain amino acids, your protein powders, your instant coffees, like all of it's garbage that accumulates where in the areas we love. Like you see it, I see it. So and then you've got that part of fitness that's like crept into the outdoor space. And then you've got this idea that everyone needs to be doing like CrossFit Games athletes level workouts. You've got to be doing all these miles to enjoy or to be like hardcore backcountry hunter, like all of this craziness. And I'm a you know, I'm a coach on the Train to Hunt staff. Like I believe in the value of physical fitness and readiness, but at a point, right? Like getting to know the actual person, their life, what they've got going on, responsibilities, orthopedic injuries, and tailoring something for their goals. It's not necessarily about more volume and high intensity. So what are your thoughts on kind of all of my ramblings? So maybe like how health and fitness has bled into the outdoor space and your ideas of fitness and why it's important to you as a dad, as a hunter, as an outdoor enthusiast.
I think, I mean, it's just important to be able to get out to do what you're going to do. And, you know, we were talking before the quarantine has been rough on me because it's been, I mean, we're going for walks and trying to, you know, we're getting out, but you're sitting in your house and you're bored and the cupboard's right there. So, you know, it's just kind of, it's easy to do. It's just easy to do that. With that, so being able to get to where you're going, you know, I'm not going out west this year. So, but, you know, I need to be able to get down into our swamp, which is, you know, 3/4 of a mile. The last probably third of a mile is through muck and water. And the easier you can do that, or the better you can do that without, one, getting yourself all sweated up, and two, quiet and sneaky. You got to be able to do that. I think getting back to the Cameron Hanes and that type of stuff, there's a lot of trendiness in hunting now that I don't know if it comes from the new hunters or if it's just what it is, but I have trouble with the trendiness, the trendy things. And I don't, you know, part of it might just be that I'm a snob. I don't know if maybe it says more about me than anything else, but it's just kind of, you need, obviously fitness is important and you need to be able to do that, but to have, you know, I want to take these supplements and I got to do this and I got to do that. No, you don't. You just, you know what, eat healthy. You know, you're getting, if you're successful in shooting a deer, you got a whole bunch of lean meat. Eat that. You know, eat that instead of going to McDonald's and having a hamburger. And learn to make it where, you know, maybe don't make it out of sausage where, like I said, you know, you're adding a third pork fat to it. Learn to eat it. You know, last night we had a chunk of backstrap for dinner that, you want to talk about lean. I mean, there's nothing to it. And I had marinated in some red wine, some olive oil, and some onions, and grilled it, and it was as good as any meat that you're going to get. Have that with a little salad, and that's a good dinner. So it comes down to do these things. You don't need to buy into everything else. I mean, I just got a big shipment from one of the trendier hunting clothing communities. I had a gift card from them and still wasn't certain, you know, still was like, had trouble spending that much money on stuff when I could sit in my, you know, $40, $50 bibs and I can sit all day in those. What do I need $300 bibs for? What's the difference? Just give me some, if it works for you, do it. Yeah. And that's, I think people, if there could be a message for young hunters, and that's one of the things that we talk, you know, that when you're doing the mentored hunts, they're asking, because they're trying to figure out, do I like this enough to make that big of an investment? And then you're, you know, use what, you know, I'm shooting a 40-some-year-old bull right now, and I'm planning on trying to hunt with that this year. But before that, I have a $400 or $500 bow, and I love bow hunting.
Mm-hmm.
But I walked in five years ago into our bow shop and told him I'm shooting. At that point, I was shooting a 20-some-year-old bull, and I told him, I'm like, here's my budget. I don't want to spend more than that. My goal is always to shoot a deer at 8 yards.
Yeah.
My far shots are 17 yards.
Uh-huh.
So I don't need the $2,000 setup.
Yeah.
I just want this because that's what I do. And I think just keep in mind what you're trying to do, and I just know that the deer doesn't give a shit what kind of bow you shot it with, as long as you can put the arrow where you want to put it. Yeah. So, and it doesn't care what the label was on the clothes that you're wearing, as long as if you need it to sit longer, get it.
Yeah. If
you don't need it to sit longer, then you don't need it.
I like it.
And so I don't know.
No, I like it.
I don't even remember. Yeah.
I borrowed. Speaking of sitting longer, I borrowed one of those heat suits. Heat. Do you know what I'm heater? It's like It's like a Snuggie, right? That you like zip up. He let me use that because he wasn't able to go late season, like during all the crazy weekends that we had for rifle hunting this year. I sat one of those, man. It was brutally cold, and I was like sweating in one of those things. Yeah. So if you can get on that, but those like sell out every year, and there's a wait list. If you can get on that list and you can afford one of those, that thing was amazing. It's super quiet. You can like slip in and out of it. But as soon as you said that, I was like, that's like my bucket list thing. You could sit.
How much?
Those were, I think it's like 300 or 400.
But how much movement do you have to do to get out of it if you're gonna shoot a bow or shoot your?
I didn't use my bow with it. I should have. I had already filled my bow tag by then, so I was just trying to put more does in the freezer. But with like all I did with my rifle is wherever I was sitting, it was either propped up in between my legs or like across my legs, depending on where I was sitting. And then I just had the zipper open, and all I had to do was like kind of like slide my arms out of it. There wasn't, I don't know, I didn't have to like make a bigger silhouette. All I had to do was kind of like slide my arms out of it and grab my gun. The thing is, I did make the mistake of getting my scope too close, and that thing fogged up instantly because there's so much radiant heat coming out of there. I made that mistake. But going back to, and I know I think it was you posted something about, we're going back to now food and hunting and trendiness. I read I'm not going to mention names, but I read a like backcountry training book, and I damn near died of like laughter when I got to the diet template, because it was like total bro meals, like, you know, baked chicken breasts, broccoli, rice, like all this shit you don't find like seasonally. So I always test people in the outdoor space if they're pushing any of that stuff. I'm like, what does that do from the environment? Like from a land ethics standpoint, right? We always talk about subsistence hunting as a big reason why we do this, for the food. Well, it's like, look at the rest of the entirety of your diet then. If that's really going to be, I challenge people to do this. So this training program of how to train for the outdoors, not a speck of wild game, or maybe like once a week. And the rest of it was like the quote unquote bro food that you would find in any like muscle and fitness magazine. So that I found hilarious. And I think it was you that mentioned trying to get the foraging speaker at the state rendezvous this year.
Oh, yeah, Sam Thayer.
Yeah, I don't necessarily want to talk about him, but the idea of foraging, of seasonal eating, like perennial food systems. What does that look like for you? Are you someone that forages? Are you getting into it, learning more?
I guess I'm getting into it. I'm interested in it. I don't necessarily trust myself enough, other than like, there's stuff that you can't screw up. Like a morel is a morel, and a ramp is a ramp. But like, there's other things where it's like, okay, is this the thing that is good, or is this the thing that can kill me? And when you read their books, you can't screw them up. But it's just more of the, I guess, getting over that mental block that you have. but yeah, I'm just interested in it. Come partially from Hank Shaw, reading his stuff because he does a lot of that, and then then he turned onto that one that the Forager's Delight or whatever it is. Actually, it's behind me somewhere. Or Forager's Harvest. I'm interested in it. I guess I don't do a whole lot of it other than the stuff that I just talked about, and even that is more if I have time versus like actually making trips to go do it. So I kind of talk about, I have a lot of irons in the fire when it comes to just everything. My wife will say too many. So then it just gets to where you have to make a choice between you can only make so many trips away a year, so many, you only have so much time. I'd rather go catch a bunch of fish than wander through the woods with a book trying to figure out what I'm doing. If I'm given the choice, that doesn't mean if I could go every day that I wouldn't be wandering through the woods with a book trying to figure out what this plant is and what that plant is. Just you only have so much time.
Definitely, I love it. Well, we're hitting an hour, so Noah, thanks again for coming on. What do you want to conclude with? What do you want to leave? What are your concluding thoughts on BHA, R3, fitness, outdoor life? What do you want to leave people? Quarantine life? If this is an SOS call for help, it could be that as well.
Yeah. Everything's open right now. Just everything's open when it comes to the outdoors. The state parks are open. Public lands are open. So get out there and just take a walk. I'll say, it's a good time. It's a good time to be in the woods right now. So it's time to we're all slowing down. I think it might be, I guess the quarantine might be a good reset. If nothing else, looking at a silver lining, a good reset for what's important. What can you do? Life has slowed down. It just has had to because of this. So you realize, I look out my front window and see more people taking walks than ever before because it's the only thing to do now, and it's the ability to get outside. So take advantage of that. Find the silver lining in things. I mean, I think one thing that hunting and fishing has taught me is the ability to put up with being uncomfortable. And life isn't always perfect, so you just got to make the best of it. There's those days where it's sleeting and 20-mile-an-hour winds and 30 degrees or lower, and you just got to sometimes just put your hood up and hunker down because it's still the rut and they're still going to be doing something. So you got to sit there and just take it. And that's what this is hunker down. We got to take it, find the good things. And sometimes the good things might just be snuggling down into your hood a little bit more on days like that. It's, the Brewers aren't playing and you don't get to watch the Brewers, but you have time now to go walk that piece of property that you hadn't walked before. So find the good things.
I love it, man. I love it. Thanks again for coming on the podcast, and good luck to you in quarantine. Everybody listening, thanks for listening. Thanks for supporting the show, and just like Noah said, make sure you're getting outside.